Howdy there, and welcome to the long-awaited Fall Out Boy album review. I just shit myself. Here we are, folks. After the last week and a half leading up to the release of their new song, I have been listening to every Fall Out Boy album multiple times in depth to form a cohesive album ranking on what I believe their worst two best albums are. And this is not an opinion, this is all definitive fact. My opinion is objective, and you're a fucking bitch. That about covers it. Anyway, I made a Spotify playlist coinciding with what I think is the best of their entire discography. I've picked 3 songs from every single album in this video and compiled it into a best of playlist. Now, the way this works is obviously it's not the best of their entire discography, but it works on what I believe are the 3 best songs on all of their albums. If you want a good feel for Fall Out Boy and sort of every sound they've sort of went through, go ahead and check that out. Link will be in the description if you're interested. Other than that, let's just start out right here, right now, baby.
Here we go!
Bottom of the list, bottom of the barrel, no shocker to anybody who is a Fall Out Boy fan, is their most recent studio album and 7th studio album, Mania. What can I say about this album that hasn't already been said? It's disappointing, it's a letdown, it's just bad in so many ways. Lyrically, there's so much fucking cringe on this album that there are multiple times during so many songs like Sunshine, Riptide, or Stay Frosty that I just couldn't, actually, when I heard them, literally visibly cringed. The lyrical cringe on this album is immense. And other than that, the songs are just not good. There's about a 4-song run that starts with The Last of the Real Ones and ends at Church, where the songs are decent or at least bearable. They're definitely far from anything of some of the best shit Fall Out Boy's put out, but they're the best on this album. And Church in particular, I think Patrick Stump has an amazing vocal performance on, but that's about the best I can say for this album. Everything before and after that run of songs is just utter garbage. Sunshine Riptide might be one of my least favorite Fall Out Boy songs. Some real lyrical cringe, and I don't know who the fuck Burna Boy is, but his presence on this track is not appreciated. No offense to him, I have no clue who he is. I'm just saying, not good on this song. And that segues into what I believe might be one of the worst songs I've ever heard, Young and Menace. I remember the day this song dropped, listening to it, and just feeling complete and utter disappointment with it. And that hasn't changed to this day. I barely listened to that song, so I was like, maybe coming back to it, I'll gain some sort of appreciation for it. No. It's lyrically cringe like the rest of the album, and nothing about this song is cohesive in any sort of way. It feels like what I would expect sensory overload to feel like. I've never come closer to experiencing sensory overload than listening back to this song. It's a complete and utter mess of sounds that don't go together, horrible vocal effects on Patrick Stump, and just utterly not a pleasant experience in any single way. Next up, we have Fall Out Boy's 6th album, American Beauty, American Psycho. Now, this album isn't nearly as bad as Mania is. It's not a bad album, but I would say it's a very mid album in their discography. There are some songs on here I genuinely actually love, like the title track, Novocaine, and Uma Thurman, which is such a fucking banger to this day. That fucking bass line and the Patrick's fucking vocals are, dude, some good songs on it. There are some good songs on it, but for the most part, this album is mid as fuck. It's either really shitty attempts at arena rock sports anthems like Irresistible or Centuries, or fucking whole ass literally whole ass YouTube royalty-free background music like The Kids Aren't Alright and Favorite Record. Jetpack Blues is pretty good, but it's not one of the best on the album. Other than that, very mid-album, and this is also a problem with Mania that I forgot to mention, but there is such a lack of guitar presence on this album that it is frustrating. And this has been a problem ever since Fall Out Boy ended their hiatus and finally reunited. it's been a problem since then. Since Save Rock and Roll, it has been a problem, and it is only becoming more and more of a problem with these subsequent album releases. However, thankfully, with new music releasing, it doesn't seem to be a problem now, which is nice. This album is not bad by any means. It's not bad, I will say that. But it's absolutely mid as fuck, and if you're gonna listen to this album, go into it like expecting some songs you're gonna like, some songs you're not really gonna like, and just don't expect to get much out of it. That's all I'm saying. Also, we both know that the Kids Aren't Alright is on this album. Next up, we have the first album that I would actually say is good. It's not great, it's not that good, but it is still overall a good album. That being their fifth album, Save Rock and Roll. Save Rock and Roll was definitely a departure from their sound. After coming back from the hiatus from Folie à Deux, being their previous album before that, where they definitely did change stuff up a lot with that as well, you definitely would expect them, like, 3 years later, a 3-year hiatus, no new music, all being in different spots in life, finally reuniting again. You'd expect some different sounding stuff. That's not the problem here. The problem is that in some ways, this was where the downward trajectory started. This is where they started using less and less guitars. This is when Joe Troman started basically fucking standing there doing nothing at times. This is ground zero. This album is ground zero. There are definitely some songs I think benefit from the lack of guitar presence, such as Just One Yesterday and fucking... Where Did the Party Go? How did I forget that? That's like my favorite song on this album. It benefits from that. It definitely does. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss it. Now, I'm not going to speak too much about this album because I do have a review that I've recorded for it already for its 10-year anniversary. That's going to be coming out in April when the album turns 10 years old. But I will say that there are a few songs I've done complete 180s on, like Rat-a-Tat. I absolutely despised that song in previous years, but honestly, it might just be my favorite on the album now. It's a solid song. Courtney, even on this album, is not bad by any means. I'm not a fan of her as a person, but vocally she adds a lot to this album. Death Valley, also incredible song. Patrick's vocals are incredible. The strongest suit of this album honestly has to be Patrick vocally. He's never been a bad vocalist, but he really shines on this among pretty much all of their albums, but this one definitely has a special feeling to it in my mind. Next up on the Fall Out Boy chopping block, weird chopping block, I know, is an album that I don't see talked about as much in these rankings or in general, honestly. And I understand why. It's not technically an official album. However, it is technically their unofficial first album, that being Evening Out With Your Girlfriend. This is actually a very rare CD. Very proud of this. $10. Anyway, Evening Out With Your Girlfriend. Great album, honestly. Well, not great. It's good. It's good. It's pretty good. It's not as good as some of their later work. It's definitely far from the best. However, it is good. It's a solid experience. It's short. It's only 30 minutes long, 9 songs, but it's got a very different feeling to it that at first I wasn't very fond of, but honestly has grown with me in subsequent listens. The album being on Spotify and everything now definitely helps, and the CD honestly has a rougher, not as good sort of quality and production to it as the streaming version. However, I kind of like it more, but it's kind of hard to find that as easily. But anyway, rambling aside, it's good. It has a feeling of I saw someone comment this on one of my Reddit posts in the Fall Out Boy subreddit, that this album sounds like you're listening to this band in the garage just fucking playing a very small show. And honestly, that is exactly how I would best sum up this album. That's what it feels like. And honestly, it has a very distinct charm to it in that respect. Lyrically, it's pretty good. Obviously Fall Out Boy's never been bad on that until recently. But only real complaint about it is Patrick's vocals, which is never a complaint to me on a Fall Out Boy album. But this time, you can tell Patrick doesn't really know what he's doing with his voice. Obviously, like, his vocals are very drowned out as well with stuff like the guitar or the bass, the drums. It feels like everything is just overpowering him vocally. And that's definitely a problem that I couldn't get past. I've warmed up to it. I consider it a very important step in the band's progression, so that's why I wanted to put it on here. Now here's the point where we start getting to the really good albums, and honestly, if you put any of these albums in any order past here, I would not hold it against you. I think all of these albums are very good and distinct in their own respects, and they all deserve proper credit. Now this is going to be a weird one, because I'm putting From Under the Cork Tree up next. And that's probably going to confuse some people, because that's a very high regarded album. That means I'm putting their first album above Cork Tree, which is unheard of in the Fall Out Boy community, but here we are. From Under the Cork Tree, I'm not saying it's bad by any means. This is an absolutely amazing album that I find myself coming back to a lot. It's definitely a solid progression of sound from their first album. It feels like the natural evolution of it and where it is heading. There's a lot more presence. Substantial presence from Pete Wentz vocally, which is something I've always wanted more of in Fall Out Boy's music. Some of the songs on here, like Get Busy Living or Get Busy Dying, have this. The bridge is absolutely amazing. It's Pete and Patrick like switching like lines, like Patrick doing a line, Pete doing a line. That sounds like coke, but I'm talking about song lyrics. And Pete like screams and everything have always been something I've loved and been that I never see enough of in Fall Out Boy's music. This feels like a good culmination of that, as well as just a natural evolution of sound. There's some absolute fucking bangers on here, some absolutely amazing, catchy as fuck songs. Like, it's no shock at all why Dance Dance became a hit. That song is absolutely fucking infectious with that slick fucking bass melody and Patrick's vocals, like even the guitar riffs, everything on it feels designed to get you sucked into that song. And the rest of the album is a lot like that too. It's very good, and not just that it's catchy, also has a lot of substance to it, lyrically, instrumentally, vocally. Everything about it is very cohesive, has a lot of substance to it. And now, Fall Out Boy's first album, Take This to Your Grave. I see a lot of people not really like discussing this as one of their best, but honestly, something about it just keeps drawing me in and in. I feel like the sound they went for, they absolutely nailed it. It sounds like a more comprehensive and cohesive version of what they were going for on Evening Out with Your Girlfriend. It's not as rough around the edges. It's definitely a little rough around the edges, not gonna lie, it is. It's to the point where it becomes, in this case, it's a perk rather than a drawback, like it on Evening Out. Evening Out was very rough, very hard to listen to in a lot of aspects, and I get why people just don't resonate with it as much. Even the band don't. However, with Take This to Your Grave, it feels like they just perfected that, honestly. They made it to a point where it's like a little like underproduced, but at the same time, like, it really benefits from that in a way. It feels like such an authentic sound. Like, I love the style they go for of like a very pop punk type vibe. They've always been a pop punk band, but this feels like the most pop punk that they have ever like done as an album, not as a song, but as an album. It's got that whole feeling throughout every song. Like, I will catch myself singing every single word to it. It's very good. I think some of the highlights of this song are Chicago Is So 2 Years Ago. I love the part in the second verse where it just sort of like drops a lot of the instrumentation and you can hear like Patrick's vocals really just soaring through. It's really good. And obviously Patrick Stump has had such an amazing transition vocally from Evening Out to Take This to Your Grave. These were recorded like within a year of each other, and the difference is dramatic. Not saying he was bad on Evening Out, he was just not properly trained, but you can tell he's definitely been putting in like the work for this. And it gets like that with every album, honestly. I'd say Patrick Stump's voice only gets better with time. Especially on Cork Tree, that was such an improvement. Great album altogether. I just really love the sound of it. It's what really keeps me coming back for more. There's a good Pete Wentz presence on here vocally, which I absolutely love. The patron saint of liars and fakes is such a fucking incredible closing song. That's one thing I haven't mentioned. Fall Out Boy are really good at picking closing songs for albums for some reason, and this is just the start of a beautiful trend. Next up, this is the moment. This is the debate that every Fall Out Boy fan seems to find themselves in. Is it Infinity on High or Fully Ado? Which is their best album? And I'm here to tell you folks, it is not Infinity on High. Though, impeccable album right here. This is really the start of what makes Fall Out Boy great. Especially vocally, like what I talked about, the progression of Patrick Stump's vocals. It hits so hard on this album. He goes into like such different highs and even lows he starts to go in on this album that really just show the range that this man is just capable of. He holds such insane notes. It's just amazing, like some of the stuff that is done on here. There's some really like dark feeling songs on here, like Fame, Lesser Than Infamy, You're Crashing But You're No Wave, there's some darker feeling songs. It has my favorite Fall Out Boy song of all time, the Carpool Tunnel of Love. Just such an incredible song. The bridge with Pete screaming it all, it's just incredible. It's such like a it's a very hard-hitting song. It's so fucking good. This album's amazing, and honestly, I feel like these two are very interchangeable for first place. For a while, Infinity on High was my favorite. However, that has obviously changed in recent years. I don't really have anything negative to say about this album. I will say sometimes I do skip Golden when I'm listening to this album, but that's by no means a bad song by any stretch of the words. It's just sometimes I'm just not in the mood for it, which I feel like it should be understandable. And lastly, Fall Out Boy's best album to date, Fully Ado. This album is incredible. I would say it's my second favorite album of all time, only behind My Chemical Romance's Black Parade. This album is the culmination of all their pre-hiatus work. This is what they were working up to for years. This is the culmination of all the progress made, all the way since Evening Back, all the way up to Infinity on High. This was the natural progression. It sounds very similar to Infinity on High while also trying a lot of new things that I think work out amazing for the band. And I hate that upon release it was so like critically and commercially panned for some reason, but now it's seen as like some of their best work, if not their best by a lot of people. Every song on this album, it feels like it was perfectly designed to be there in that order. There's a lot of transitions into other songs that just work so well that a lot of times, like, I can't even listen to like just an individual song on here because like this album, any song on here works best as a straight run, a straight piece, honestly. And I can go for a lot of albums, obviously, that's how albums should be designed to be. But with this one, it feels weird to detach it from the album, honestly. It doesn't feel right. Not saying I won't listen to songs on their own, I'm not trying to be pretentious or some shit, but there's always a little tiny empty feeling when I don't hear the transition that I know is obviously there. Either way, fucking incredible album. West Coast Smoker, another amazing, like, closing track. Head First Slide into Coopertown has such a fucking hard-hitting guitar riff that I just absolutely love. There's not as much vocal presence from Pete Wentz on this album, however, I feel like that's just a nitpick and a personal preference. I'd say this album is just so amazing. Honestly, I love Lil Wayne's feature on Tiffany Blues. It's just... A lot of times Fall Out Boy have had this thing where they try to bring in featuring artists and it just doesn't work, but this, it feels so natural. It feels like that part was just built around Lil Wayne being there, and it's just something that I feel like they really haven't been able to reproduce in recent years. can't get enough of this album and never will be able to. It's one of my favorite albums of all time, and I will be coming back to it for years to come. Honestly, just do yourself a favor. If you only listen to one, like, if you only listen to a little bit of anything I recommend in here, make it off this album. I'll give you a few songs: West Coast Smoker, Wham's, Coffees for Closure. Speaking of which, Coffees for Closure, that fucking, like, string section at the end, it's so fucking beautiful. Genuinely such an incredible song. Personally, I think that would have worked better as the closing song. However, West Coast Smoker is by no means a bad song to close on. It's my favorite album of theirs. And, like, What a Catch Donnie is such a hard-hitting song. Every song on this just feels perfectly made, perfectly placed on the track list, honestly. I can't honestly think of anything I could really critique this album over, other than just not much vocal presence from Pete Wentz as I would like. But honestly, that's a complaint I have with most of their albums. Ignore that the lighting changed. I keep that in, Carter. I don't care. Either way, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for, if you did watch all the way through, goddamn, I appreciate you. I appreciate you big time. So, listen to the playlist, listen to the albums, highly recommend it. Bye. Love you.